Introducing Daniel Rios, also known by his students as Mr. Rios, Rios, Jefecito, or Rivers Man. Mr. Rios has been teaching for 9 years and is currently out of the K-12 classroom and is now teaching adults with disabilities. But he primarily taught history and social studies at a charter organization for grades 6 through 12. He started in the community college system and attended San Joaquin Delta College. He then transferred to Sac State, where he completed his undergraduate degree and credentials. He recently graduated from the University of the Pacific with a Master of Arts in Educational Entrepreneurship. He and his childhood best friend have also started a podcast of their own called Socially Challenged, where he and his friend debate over topics they are diametrically opposed on while still maintaining their lifelong friendship at the end of each heated episode. You can find their podcast on Spotify if you would like to learn more, but be advised that there is use of foul language. Visit our blog at www.educatorsnotrobots.com for links to Mr. Rios' podcast information. Thank you so much for joining us today at Educators Not Robots, where we humanize the educational experience. If you like what you hear, please leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you are using. Positive reviews help us reach a wider audience and share these incredible stories of everyday teachers. And now we introduce to you Mr. Rios. All right, Daniel Rios, we're recording now. And so we're talking about podcasting because you also are now an educator podcaster. Oh, yeah, look at that. I'm drinking water. I haven't been drinking enough water today. Oh. They're cheers. For people who don't see us and will not see us, they're cheering each other with their liquor right now.
It's Friday. You got to get a drink in.
It's a Friday night, baby.
Yeah, so you're doing a podcast, we're doing it. So you asked how our podcast is going. It's been pretty good. Our viewership is slowly going up. And I don't know, because you've started a podcast, you've probably done a little background research, but I read that it takes about 4 to 5 months to get a decent followership. So I kind of feel like we're kind of on that upswing. Every week we just get a couple more followers, according to the little dashboard we have on the platform we use. So it's just kind of hard for me. It's hard keeping up with the social media. I learned about some apps that can help with that, and so I'm using Planoly, but I haven't set it up completely. I just have the app right now with my account, but Planoly is supposed to be a good one, and there's some other ones, but the social media is hard to keep up with because I'm still teaching. So
I think having two people helps too. I'm doing it with my friend, and he's a media guy. He's in that media space.
Oh, that's
and so
perfect.
he's doing more of the engineering part of it, I guess, putting our tracks together when we record, uploading it, doing all the technical stuff, but we're still learning as we go. My wife and I were actually cooking dinner and listening to your guys' podcast while we were cooking dinner, and had some, it was cool, and I was like, hey, I know those girls, because it was your interview with Linda.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was pretty cool. You guys all have nice voices. Rosalie, you have a really good NPR style voice.
Ooh, thanks.
So I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I like what you guys have done with it, and it looks clean on Spotify and all that kind of stuff. So, anything I can learn from you in that space, I would love to learn it. It's cool to connect with people who have similar hobbies.
I definitely recommend. There's a Facebook group, and are we friends on Facebook? Do you have a Facebook?
I do. I think we're friends on Instagram now.
So if we connect on Facebook, I can invite you to a podcast support group that's been super helpful.
Oh, that's cool.
After this, I'll invite you to it. And that, I wish I had signed up for it before I even started recording, but it's still been super helpful. So
okay, I would love to take a look at that.
It's really cool because people ask questions, so you can see all the answers that people give, and there's just they're really supportive, and they just give a lot of good advice on all the little things that you have questions about. I have questions about, they're getting answered on that group. So for sure. Tell us about your podcast.
I'm actually super excited about this because of the fact that you are an educator. All right.
Yep.
And you're trying to do something with the podcast world. And I think that this is a great time for collaboration, a great time for us to bounce ideas off each other, to share resources like we're doing right now already. Definitely think that this is going to be a great conversation. So go tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, okay. So I honestly, I was just going to casually, weave it into the conversation, but I'll spotlight it for a second.
Yeah.
So my buddy and I, it's the podcast is called Socially Challenged.
Okay.
And it's kind of a take on like socially awkward and like mentally challenged a little bit. It's just like a little play on words, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I co-host it with my best friend. His name's Sam Fergoza. And we've literally been friends since we were 4 years old.
Aww.
And we both are we come from opposite sides of the political spectrum. I'm definitely more to the left, and he's a pretty staunch, he would call himself a libertarian.
Okay.
And so we've kind of just our relationship, we've gone through our relationship butting heads a lot and talking about politics, but we have such a good relationship with one another that we can argue and have a civil disagreement and then, go have some beers and,
yes.
A meal with each other and still love one another.
I love that.
Our conversations do get heated. I'm not going to lie, especially in our last episode, as we're coming closer to the election. It's about, it's mostly about like current events and politics. But also, we grew up in the same church. We grew up in a really strict Christian church. And so that experience molded us together. And we're both grad school level educated dudes, and we have very different views on the world, and so we're just trying to show people that you can actually have those disagreements and not hate people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we're just trying to have that
beautiful
conversation and see where it goes.
So this is interesting because I actually grew up all over the place as a military brat, but
yeah,
my best friend in Virginia during my middle school through high school years into college, and to this day, he actually started off super conservative Republican and has since, I guess, kind of changed his views. But when we were growing up, we used to have these epic conversations, I would call them. But my sisters, because we would talk on the phone for like back in the day when there's only one line in the house. We used to be on the phone, and my sisters are like, "Why are you fighting for an hour on the phone? Get off the phone! You're just fighting." And I was like, "We're just having conversations."
That's just how we talk.
This is how we're just passionate about things, and we like to talk to each other about them. And we truly do. We love each other so much, and we can disagree all day long, but we totally love each other. So it's crazy.
That's exactly. It's funny because I'm 35 years old. He's 35 years old, and we're grown men, and we tell each other we love each other when we get off the phone. All right, brother, love you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I know that's
real, bro. That's a real bro.
Yeah, that is. It's a real life brother. You know what I mean?
That's it.
So yeah, we're just trying to do that. It's been cool. It's been an interesting experience. We also have one of our buddies who's a military veteran. He was in Fallujah he's in the Army. He did a couple tours, but Fallujah was one of the places he was at. And we just call him our wartime correspondent, and we have him on every once in a while. His name's Eric.
Nice.
That's really, and he's a firefighter in Denver now. And so we, to get that perspective is pretty cool. And so we want to have just different people on it and talk about the things that are going on and get different perspectives on it. So
respect, man, respect. I love that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
How long have you all been doing that?
All right, so we actually had our first show I think we went live on Facebook in like 2016, like right before the election. And then we just went quiet for like 3 years and then had our second episode probably like a year ago, and then probably up to close to 10 episodes now. So yeah, it's on Spotify. We're still trying to figure out like how you have it. You seem to have it everywhere, like on Apple, on Spotify, all that stuff. And so I would love to hear from you about how you actually get it on all the platforms.
Yeah, how did we do that?
I did most of that work.
She's the one behind it, dude. I'm trying to tell y'all.
There's actually platforms that will help make that process easy, and I use Podbean. So Podbean is like the main platform that I publish on, and then it actually makes it real easy it just kind of, I selected what other platforms I wanted to add it to on their list. Like they give you a list of like the most popular platforms, and I just kind of clicked I want it to be on those, and then it automatic when I publish on Podbean, it shoots out to all the other ones. Podbean's not the only one, but it's just
Lysol or Lyston, I think that's the one he's using right now. It's called Lyston.
Okay, yeah. There's like that one. There's another one. There's a few that are pretty popular. After joining
and do you have to pay for like so because I guess we were running into a thing where we're only allowed on Spotify to upload like 45-minute chunks of episodes.
Yeah,
you have to pay for a subscription, right?
Yeah, I think there's a free version where you're very limited, and then there's different levels, and I'm on the first level right now. So as I'm like, I kind of figured as we're building our fan base and like figuring out where we're going. I do want to eventually open up a Patreon account once we establish ourselves as an LLC, because we're currently trying to look for a stenographer to do transcription for us to make it accessible on YouTube, so that hard of hearing and deaf or just more visual people can read closed captions while they listen. So we would.
I heard that episode you had with the teacher who was she's hearing impaired, right?
Yeah, she's deaf.
Yeah,
profoundly deaf. Yeah,
That's so crazy to see. Like, I could hear the delay a little bit with the signing.
Yeah.
But it's very common if you've ever had a conversation with somebody who's hearing impaired. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really.
Thanks for checking that out, man.
Yeah, that's probably our.
Hey, I don't. Yeah.
I want to listen to yours now. I haven't listened to yours yet.
I know, we're gonna have to listen.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna listen.
Yeah, listen to it. I'll just forewarn you on it, man. It's not like necessarily a family friendly.
I was gonna ask you that. Because I was like, I wonder if my students can listen to like kind of get a sense of how people, but I guess not, like of how people can disagree.
I try to. I noticed this about myself, and I guess this is like what's cool about this stuff is I think it's almost like therapy. You know, you talk so much, it almost becomes therapy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably ran into this as an educator. But, you know, when I was a classroom teacher, I used to film myself a lot, and I would go back and I would watch almost like game footage of my teaching. And it kind of puts you in check and humbles you a little bit, because you're like, oh, is that what I look like? Is that what my voice sounds like? Is that, you know what I mean? Do I say like that many times? And so doing this, I noticed that when I get hyped about a topic, I cuss a lot, and I'm trying to, you know what I mean? I'm trying to get better about that.
So you communicate like a human. It sounds like you communicate like a person who is passionate about things.
And you know, we have a couple drinks when we do it too. And and we know we've been friends since we were 4 years old, so we know how to push each other's buttons. And so all that. So I mean, it's not like we talk about anything you know, bad. It's just that, you know, we'll curse a little bit, talk politics, and, you know, talk some crap back and forth. So
that's what it's funny, because I had considered how like it would be a fun podcast if it was teachers drinking together and just, you know, talking. But then I was like, but that's not good for our careers. So like, unfortunately,
drunk teachers, that's what it could be called.
Drunk teachers, like, but we did, as we were.
There are podcasts that do that.
And
anonymously.
They remain anonymous.
Yeah.
Oh, that's smart. That's really smart.
And I was like, oh, wow, that is actually really smart. But then I was like, but I don't want to remain anonymous. So I was like,
nah. Yeah, hey, if we remain anonymous, I have some gems about teaching.
Oh, you can go on their podcast and just spill all the secrets.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, I definitely, I mean, we were in class together, so we were in graduate school for the people listening. That's how we know each other. And I definitely I cuss a lot when I get passionate too, in front of my professors. So I know the feeling.
Especially, I can think about one instance in particular, watching Rosalie go off in class, and I was like, it's about to happen.
Yeah.
It's about to happen, guys.
I know. I actually know what incident you're talking about. Yeah, it was.
We're all adults in the room.
I remember like it was. And
this is a safe space.
Don't worry, I'm not going to mention any names, but I thought you were going to strangle that professor. I was like, oh, it's about to happen.
Yeah, I was very close. I definitely I understand the like getting really hyped up and like starting to cuss a lot, because I love to cuss. And I first of all, I was in the military, so I use that as the mouth of a soldier. I have the mouth of a soldier. But also, I'm an English teacher, and I don't like to censor things.
Right.
Like, I don't discriminate. There's 2 words I could think of that I will not ever use. And the rest of them are fair game.
Right. I mean, obviously, like the N word is always off the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then the F word that rhymes with maggot. Like, those are
of course.
Those are the 2 words I say, okay, we can censor those. But the rest of them.
Yeah.
are fair game.
They're pretty fair game. And you know, it's funny you talk about that with teaching English. I had like a brief stint with taking over some English classes long term. Mm-hmm. And I think that censorship is like one of the worst things you can do in an English class.
Yes.
So you want to be cognizant of who your audience is, and you know, their reading abilities and like cultural sensitivity and all this kind of stuff. But like, you know, in I think the classic example is Tom Sawyer.
Yeah.
Mark Tom Sawyer. You know, it has the N-word in there a couple times, and they're banning it from schools. And I thought about it. I'm like, I mean, how the music we listen to now, you know, we're saying you're hearing that every other word.
Yeah.
It's not that kids can handle that, you know what I mean? And that's a snapshot in a time. So why not let them read something like that? You know what I mean?
And I think for me as an English teacher, it provides these really beautiful opportunities to discuss those things. And I think that, so like when it comes to like the Huckleberry Finn and all of those books, the concern about how we
Huck Finn, I'm sorry, I said Tom Sawyer, my bad.
But yeah, you know, we know which one you're talking about. Like there's the argument about, you know, just generally across the board, the canon that's used in American English classrooms is outdated. It's very white. It's very like, so I understand like why are we so stuck on these books? But so for me, it's like, well, we shouldn't ban them. We definitely should reconsider the canon and what we introduce to our students in 2020 and what we, you know, it's like, it's not to downplay the classics, if you will, but you know, we don't have to always read the classics. But then at the same time, if we do read it, even if we just touch on a passage and it happens to have the N-word in it, it provides this really great opportunity to discuss the N-word. And I've had N-word discussions in my class. I actually try to incorporate them once a year where it's like, we're going to talk about the N-word today. And it always has gone well for me. Like
good teachers will see it as an opportunity. But the administration, I think, probably see it as a liability, and that's probably where the issue is.
Yeah.
I think for sure. I could see administration being, you know, it depends on if your admin has faith in you or not. I've actually done. Do you know what Socratic seminars are?
Oh yes, I love those.
I love a Socratic seminar, and I've actually done a Socratic seminar on using the N-word.
Yes.
And so it was tough. Honestly, it was really difficult. But you know, if you train your kids well enough and like train your kids well enough and set standards and you know, boundaries about what you can discuss and can't discuss, then I think it could go pretty well. Yeah. If you don't, then that could implode and be terrible.
Yeah.
But you know,
you definitely don't want your first Socratic seminar of the year to be on the N-word. You want to train
you know
them.
What? Actually, I'll drop this because I guess it's relevant. Monday is Indigenous People and Columbus Day, right?
Yeah.
So I can remember I was teaching 8th grade history. And I always used to start my unit. It was an intro unit, and the culminating project would be a Socratic seminar. Mm-hmm. Well, it was it was a Socratic seminar, and the central question was, should the United States continue to celebrate Columbus Day as a national holiday? Mm. And so that would be the central question, and I would throw it at my kids, and they would have to use evidence-based arguments to back it up on whether or not we should continue to celebrate it. And so that's coming up on Monday.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about it. It was always one of my favorite lessons that I would do because, you know, you'd get kids coming up with solutions and talking about like Indigenous Peoples Day and just things that are more culturally relevant. And I would have loved to have history classes like that.
Yes.
But I didn't grow up having history classes like that. It was like, you know, Columbus was the dopest person.
Right.
And never mind that, you know, he helped to spark the genocide of all these natives, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's a conversation you can have on your podcast, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, so I'm actually curious about like your influences because I've recently got put onto Sagar and Jetty.
Oh man, from Rising?
Yeah,
Rising,
dude.
Him and Crystal Ball?
Yeah, dude. They're the
only ones I watch, to be honest with you. There's so much BS in the media right now with reporting, and those two do it right because, you know, Crystal's on the left and Sagar's on the right, and he's young, and I think smart. His type of thought is like the future of the Republican Party, even if I don't agree with him. You know what I mean?
I rarely agree with him, but I always want to hear what he has to say. I always want to hear what he has to say. Yeah.
Follow him on Instagram if you have an IG. Follow him. I think he's pretty funny.
Yeah. Man,
that's cool, man. We're on the same wavelength over here.
Yeah, I thought you might.
Crystal, that Rising show is my jam. I watch it every morning.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you feel like your show sort of has that feel to it, where it's very free, and and very supportive of one another type of like. What type of analysis, level of analysis, are you getting at, or is it more social and laid back, kind of how we do things over here?
Oh, well, we kind of preface the whole conversation with we're just a bunch of idiots, and you shouldn't base your
I love that. Okay.
your political take on our analysis. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But also at the same time, like I said, we're both educated people. And so we do go about it in there's a certain methodology about it. And,
so are your conversations organized in any way, or do you guys kind of set up a...
I mean, I throw up a list. I'll throw up a list on my whiteboard I have over here, but I'm not trying to follow an agenda with an objective and all that. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with that, but just for him and I, our style and, you know, our chemistry. Yeah. But we also like long form. So long form conversation.
Yes, bro.
So like our last episode went almost 4 hours.
Dang. Wow.
So I'm a huge fan of all the long form stuff that's been put out. I think it's a lost art, and I think that's my only contribution to this show, because Rosie literally does everything else. My style is to be a conversationalist. I think, you know, I'd like to call myself that, just because of the fact that I'm just so genuinely curious about other people, and I want to know what they're talking about, what they're thinking about, and it's just so natural for me to listen and try to like get you to talk. So that's my whole game. That's my entire motive, right? So
he really is.
Don't discount yourself, your talent, man. It's good.
I always tell people he's the kind of person, because this literally has happened, that we could just like walk, as we're walking from our car to a restaurant, he's made like 10 friends in the parking lot. He's just
never met a stranger, right? That's cool.
He's just always talking.
Yeah, so influences as far as that, I kind of went through this gut check, I guess, earlier in this year about what is healthy amounts of media to be consuming in your life.
Yeah.
And Rosalie, you know this just because of the work that I did in our grad program, that like mental health and wellness is really something that's important to me. I think as an educator, I learned that the hard way. You know, like teacher burnout is a real thing. And I think I experienced it in a unique way. And I know a lot of people experience it. And so, you know, I really did have to go on this like gut check journey about like the things that I was allowing into my brain space and the things that I won't allow.
Yeah.
And and being in, you know, in COVID times and shelter in place, like there's so much just like stuff going on and being put in our heads, and, you know, we're not socializing as much. And so I think we have to be really cautious about what we actually do put in our heads. And I think what really like kind of just really amplified this for me was with the George Floyd stuff.
Yeah.
I woke up one morning and I had seen, you know how you see like headlines on YouTube or you know, and I was like, I can't watch that, man. I'm not in the right brain space for it.
Right.
And it was one morning I was waking up and I was doing my morning thing, and my brother sent me a video on Facebook Messenger, and he's like, hey, watch this. And it was the video of, you know, George Floyd being, I mean, if we're being honest, being executed in front of our eyes, you know what I mean? And I'm not going to lie, like I got teary-eyed thinking about it for probably a week, almost 2 weeks after that. Every day I thought about it, and I was like, did I just watch somebody die in front of me? Like not in real life, but, you know, on video.
Right, yeah.
And I just noticed that like the media I was consuming was putting me in this brain space. Like I would get up and I would look at Twitter, and I would look at I would look at Trump's Twitter in the morning, and I would just be pissed off by something that he said.
Right.
And it was dictating my brain space for the rest of the day, and I could tell.
Yeah.
And so I've really trying to be real good about detoxing. Maybe not detox, but by putting boundaries around the media that I consume. And I'm not always successful with it. Like I deleted Facebook off of my phone, so I'm not obsessively checking it every, you know, hour, and you know, no Snapchat, no couple other things, you know what I mean? So just putting little things to try to like free up some brain space, I think is pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think
it's made me happier.
I definitely think that we've all been feeling, I have a habit. I don't do it as methodically, I feel like, as you did, but like I will just have these weeks where I just refuse to listen to the news, to like, if I do go on my social media and it's anything about a current event, I'm just like, nope, I'm not looking at this. Like I can't. And what that's led to is I have TikTok on my phone, and I just obsessively watch TikToks because the algorithm will it will adjust to what you're interested in. So if suddenly I'm interested in watching babies videos on TikTok, then it's just going to show me a bunch of cute babies. And I'm like, yep, I'm just going to watch cute babies. Like, I'm just like, I'm not going to read the news. I don't care what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I do care. I care too much. That's why I'm going to just,
Yeah.
And I feel like the problem is I'm not aware of certain things that are going on. And I don't like that. Like, I want to be aware of what is going on. But I, like you said, I don't want to consume it to the point where it's like causing mental and physical harm to myself.
Right.
It's really hard balance, because I think about too, like, there is a certain level of privilege that comes with being able to shut those things down. And like, you know, not wanting to continue to do whatever work I can within the little space I live in to help disable the things that we're seeing with like racism and ableism and anti-LGBT and like all those things, but also like not letting those things take residency up in my mind to the point where I'm not, you know, I'm not able to function. It's a really hard balance.
Yeah, you can care for those things, and that's what I'm learning is you can care about those topics. And I don't think you or I would have gotten into education if we didn't give a crap about kids and the problems in our society. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think most teachers are virtuous in that sort of in that avenue.
Right.
But like I said, I'm learning that it can't take up all of your brain space to make it that you don't live a happy life. You
Exactly.
know?
It's a big issue when what's being broadcast to you sort of is being consumed without your intentional consent. Like, I mean, without your, you know, when you turn on something and the first thing that pops up as you look at your phone is like graphic images, it's invading your space. So like, I feel like
that's a great point.
What's interesting about media and how it's morphed into what it is today, I think, is that it serves the purpose, I guess social media specifically, but I feel like it's serving the purpose of conversation. You know, it's just communication between people. And why long form podcasts still have a place in this, you know, in this genre, I guess, is that people just really crave the communication. So it can be in the form of several related TikTok videos at 20 seconds each, or it can be in the form of a conversation that lasts 4 hours. It's the same thing, because you're just basically binge watching something or binge consuming something. But I think something that you relate to in a way that you would also relate to if it was live and in person. So like me having a conversation with you face to face is almost as comforting. You know, I find the same comfort when I listen to two other people on a podcast having a conversation face to face. There's something about the familiarity that you're hearing that kind of gives that comfort, and that, I don't know, it's really, really an interesting time, and that we're kind of like, we're able to peek into other people's lives this way, in a way that
you have access that you never had before, you know, and I think it's helped me to see just how kind of crappy things have been. You know, like, and I'm a credentialed history teacher, so like history is my thing. So just looking back on you know, the totality of history, a lot of times, even like our country's history, and I look back on it and I'm like, oh, we did some pretty cool things, and then I'm like, we did some really crappy things too. And I think access to information and the different types of information that we have now has totally like changed my perception of who we are in the world, and maybe what my place in the world is. And so sometimes that's disheartening. And I don't know how you guys, I mean, you guys are both veterans, so I know that especially for you guys, I've had a conversation with one of my buddies about this before, about, you know, being sold a bill of goods and you know, going into the Navy, and then it wasn't necessarily what he thought it was. You know what I mean?
I was thinking about that recently, actually, because I definitely, he was already a little more politically aware as a young adult than I was. I went in, because 9/11 happened my senior year, and then I enlisted a couple months later, and I definitely was like, you know, it was just, 18-year-olds are just so easy to target. You know, it's just like, for the military, it's like, I was on the cusp of becoming an adult. then we know that the military targets minorities and like a certain income.
Yeah.
And I'm first generation college student. I couldn't have gone to
Yeah.
college without the military GI Bill. And so that they offered me money, and then they offered me heroism. You know, it was like you
Yeah.
it's like you're going to be able to go to college, and you're going to be like one of the greatest Americans to ever live, and you're going to get the
Right.
best training, and you go into basic, and it really is brainwashing. Like, I mean, and it's funny because when you're in it, you kind of feel it. You're like, yep, I'm being brainwashed right now. And then, but you just
Technically, it's operant conditioning. It's
yeah, sure.
Wow, that's crazy.
But it's like, but I remember like, especially, so I'm so curious about basic training today, because in 2003, when I went to basic training, it was just, I remember drill sergeants having discussions with us about, are you going to be prepared to jump on the grenade? And it was daily. Daily reminders that a real soldier will jump on the grenade to save the rest of the team. And really believing my entire military career. And to this day, honestly, like, I think about that. I'm like, I think I will jump on that grenade. And for me, it's, at the time it was like, yeah, because that's what you do. You're a soldier. That's what you do. I have kids now. And so the thought of like with like the school shooting has become a really big issue.
Oh my God.
A lot of my colleagues were very frightened starting in the 2019 school year, because, you know, it reared its ugly head again. And they were like, I don't know what I would do. Like, what would we do? And I remember just kind of not feeling fear about that. And I had talked to him about it, and I was like, and I know, I was like, because the problem is, if somebody points a gun at me, I'm going to react the way I was trained to react, and I'm not going to come home. And like, when I was a soldier, that was cool. When I was a single soldier without kids, that was cool.
Yeah.
But I have kids now, and they train you in a way where it's second nature. Like, you know, and they do that for a reason. They did research on how soldiers were performing in Vietnam, and they found that, you know, they wouldn't expend their bullets. They weren't even shooting their weapons when they were in a firefight. And in some cases, if they look at where they were shot, they can see that they were shot in the back. That meant they were running away. So they were like, how do we get them to not run away? And they came up with these training tactics that were still being used when I was in basic training to teach us that it's second nature to pull the trigger and to run forward. You know, and and like you said, like looking back, I enlisted under the Bush administration. I also got to serve under Obama. I went in thinking like, this is going to be the best thing for me personally, but also I'm going to do this for my country. And, you know, I was very angry at 9/11 and the audacity for someone to come on our turf and to do that to us. And then I remember when I got out of basic training, we got to go to AIT, and we finally got to watch the news, and we were in Iraq. When I went in, our beef wasn't with Iraq. It was very shocking for all. I remember a group of us were all sitting at the table, having just graduated basic training. We hadn't had access to the news in two months. And suddenly we're looking, and they're talking about how we invaded Iraq. And I was we were like, Iraq? I thought we were fighting Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And I feel like from that moment on, it was just constant realizing that I'd been lied to.
That's so crazy. I told you about my buddy who was in the Navy. You know, I always I actually used to mention him when, cause I taught upper high school. So I taught a lot of seniors, and I was on like the graduation committee. So I did all the senior planning, all that kind of stuff, right? Like an advisor basically. And I always used to tell him about my buddy who was in the Navy, and, you know, he was in for 8 years. He got to travel the world. He ended up doing the GI Bill and, you know, got put through college and all that kind of stuff. And he's grateful for it, but he also feels the same way as you. You know what I mean? That maybe it's worth it because he made it back, but not everybody gets that opportunity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanted to be, I think, are you 02? Are you class of 02?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm class of 03, so I was a junior when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And I was all about trying to join the military. I actually wanted to be a Marine.
Wow.
And one of the reasons I wanted to be a Marine is because I was a wrestler, And so I wanted to be on the Marine wrestling team.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do it. I went through, we talked to a recruiter, all that kind of stuff, but my vision automatically disqualified me.
Yeah.
Because I'm blind out of my left eye. So automatically disqualified me. And I remember being so bummed about it, like I can't go serve my country. I can't do this, can't do that. And then now I look back on it almost 20 years later and I'm just like, oh my, thank God I'm blind. You know what I mean? I would have just gone for it. So I lucked out,
I feel like your friend is exactly, I think, the sentiment for a lot of us who are Gulf War II veterans. We have this like split feeling of gratitude and resentment like at the same time. Like there's things I'm very resentful for, but then there's things I'm grateful for. I mean, the one thing that the military provided me was social mobility. I don't know how I could have the education that I have and the ability to socially mobilize upward that I have if the military hadn't provided me with that. But it did come at a pretty serious cost of some things that I think again, like your friend, I'm lucky that I was able to overcome and come back. But there definitely have been a lot of our battle buddies that did not have that, and we come. I think,
did you guys meet in the military?
What was that?
Did you guys meet? Sorry, I interrupted you, but did you guys meet in the military?
We did. We were actually stationed in Korea.
So you got a pretty dope husband out of it, so that's cool.
True.
Thank you.
Right. That's true.
Little known fact is our first date was on a Black Hawk ride over the city of Seoul.
He's been waiting to say that
that's,
on a podcast.
That's pretty awesome.
True statement. Statement.
I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty awesome.
And that's how we found
my first date with my wife was at Tepa's Taqueria in Stockton, right next to Delta College.
Nice.
Kind of the same thing.
But you know where Mervyn's used to be?
Oh yeah, there used to be a Mervyn's.
Yeah.
I like how you flexed on me like that. dropping Mervyn's.
Flexed on me, man. You went in a helicopter over Seoul.
Yeah, man. I think it's such a confusing thing to be, serving your country because, putting my personal story aside, I think just the fact that our country's history, as you were saying, is so complex.
Yeah.
The fact that it's just so much more layered and nuanced than the way it's told in schools and the way you're sort of taught to understand it. That's really the issue, because I think if you just told it more honestly, you'd still have people who would serve, and you'd still have people who could find peace in their decision to do that for their country. And I think we're actually doing a disservice to children or to young adults by not highlighting sort of the contentious issues that there are in our history. So I just feel like, we don't have to hide the truth so much, but I think that's kind of how it's been practiced for a long time. It's like, hey, let any kind of blemish, we want to, sweep that under the rug. Let's just like make sure the spotlight's on all the heroic things that happen. I mean, that's kind
freedom,
of
right?
Yeah, it's
freedom.
That's just status quo. That's just sort of the, par for the course of how to sell patriotism. But I think patriotism in the modern era is going to be a lot more about just understanding the complexities and acknowledging the good and the bad. I think that's going to be what true patriotism looks like in the future.
I think it can happen. And coming from a history teacher, I've been battling this a little bit. Like, have you heard of that thing? It's called the 1776 Commission. It was the commission that Trump was trying to put together to create a patriotic curriculum for American history classes.
I heard a little bit about it, and that was one of the times I shut down.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not trying to make this all politics. I'm just saying there's certain things that impacts education. You know what I mean? And coming from an educator's perspective, I just think that's super dangerous to indoctrinate people. And I think the fear is that if we are true about the things that we have done in our history, that people will be weary to maybe continue to march towards greatness, but whatever that means in America, you know what I mean? But I think you can do both. I think you can be critical of your past, and I think you can also love your country.
Absolutely. That's my point.
That's where I am. You know, like I'm grateful that I was born in one of the most beautiful places in the entire world. Not Central California, but just California in general. You know what I mean?
It's like I can both be a proud American and also wish that our country could have less racism. Isn't that okay? Can I have that?
It should be.
You know?
It should
Can I acknowledge a brutal history of slavery, but also have the hope for the world? And I understand that the world is relying on us to be good as leaders, as a country, you know, as a world power. Can both be true? Like, why do we have to be like, oh, none of that shit exists? Sorry for the cursing there, but why do we have to be like that? I just don't understand this. Why do people think it's got to be one way or the other? It's like when you finally find out, oh, you know, mommy and daddy aren't perfect. It's like, come on, guys, we can grow up and get over that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is, you were saying the way I presented it in my classroom before about slavery specifically, because you mentioned it, was look at how terrible slavery was, right? It was so terrible. All these things. I don't pull any punches. We talk about the slave trade. We read journals. We do all this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Primary sources, hardcore. But also I try to show the kids that, like, because of the system that we had set up by our founding fathers, and we have this constitution that's able to evolve, they were able to eradicate that. Yeah, it took a civil war, but we were also able to keep the semblance of a country because of the groundwork that was laid by founding fathers.
Right.
So yes, terrible things that happen, and also solutions that were made through the system, and that can happen. Mm-hmm. And you need to know that, like you said, you can be proud, you can be grateful. I don't say proud anymore. I don't like that word proud to be an American. I say I'm grateful.
Okay, yeah.
I really am. I'm grateful to be an American, and I don't care if people say they're proud. That's fine, but for me, that just doesn't fit. So I say I'm grateful to be an American, and I will criticize the bad we do till the day I die. But I'm also probably never leaving here. So
yeah, and that's always such a weird thing for me too, when you do acknowledge the bad, and then people say, well, then leave. Like, what? Like, it's like, I feel like it's just such a lazy way to shut down an argument, is honestly what it is. It's just like, you just don't, I don't know. It's very frustrating. And I think it's because currently, are you currently teaching right now, or you're still out of the classroom?
I'm not.
Okay.
I am out of the classroom still. I'm working for I work for a company that does services for adults and kids with disabilities.
Oh, okay.
So we work with adults with disabilities.
I would tell you that, I don't know how you feel about it, but I know, like, my fellow history teachers at the site I work at, they are having a hard time right now. I mean, all teachers are with COVID, but parents are listening into the lessons and are, you know, they have opinions. And it's the history teachers especially are having a hard time teaching the way they've always taught. It's always been this way. It's just, you know, and but now parents. So an example is a teacher that had a discussion about the Confederate flag and allowed students to share their opinions on it, and it was civil. And she validated students' responses because she validated a parent was listening that believes the Confederate flag is what it's not, like, basically. And when this particular student said, when I see the Confederate flag, it frightens me. When to see someone wearing it, flying it, it makes me feel scared. And the student explained why. And the teacher said, I can understand why you feel that way. The parent complained that the teacher was indoctrinating students for validating that student's feelings. And our administration backed the teacher, luckily, but just the fact that it even had to happen was and it was just like, it was such a, it just didn't make any sense. It was like, that's not indoctrination. First of all, like, now we need to define indoctrination. And like, and also, like, can we just remind everybody the Confederate flag was the flag of the sector of the United States that no longer wanted to be a part of the United States. It's not an American flag.
Right. You wouldn't fly, and I always think about that too. I'm just like, you guys realize these people tried to make it so that this country was, you know what I mean? Like they didn't want to be part of this country anymore. So they were trying to eradicate that sector of the country. So why are we flying a flag that represents that? And really what the answer is, and I'll just be, I mean, you know this, you would probably agree with this. The answer is rooted in racism. And a lot of people don't want to admit to that. They want to say it's my heritage, it's this, it's all that kind of stuff. And, you know, my personal opinion is like, you can be proud of your heritage and not fly a flag that symbolizes division and hate and symbolizes a country that was conquered by our country. You know what I'm saying?
I heard it really good. Actually, I was listening to a podcast that teacher actually recommended. It's called, oh man, what is it called? I've been talking to you about it all day. Sounds Like Hate. Have you heard of it?
Oh, no, but I'd love that. Sounds like it's right up my alley.
It is by the Southern Poverty Law.
Ooh, SPLC.
Yes, yeah. And it's new. So they have 2 stories out, but it's 4 episodes. And they one of the episode I listened to today had made the comment, like, basically, if you're of German descent and your grandparents were Nazis, you wouldn't even consider waving a swastika around.
There's no way you would.
You would never do that. So why on earth does the Confederate flag get a pass? Like,
like I said, there's a lot of reasons why, and I think the root, you keep digging the root of racism, you know, and people aren't okay with, I don't know, you know how people are so sensitive nowadays, and you could say it so definitively, like the roots are in racism.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I'm not a racist person, I this and that. And I'm like, you don't understand. You might not necessarily be a racist person. Racism in 2020 looks different than it did in 1920. Exactly. You know?
It looks very different.
You might not necessarily consider yourself a racist, and you might not actually be a racist person, but you have to understand that a lot of the tenets that you believe are rooted in racism. And so it's gonna seep through.
Right.
But yeah, and you see that in school, you see that in our curriculum, you see that in our in a lot of things, in the way that our education system is structured, you know what I mean? And I know you have those criticisms.
Yeah.
I've heard those. I know you've heard my criticisms of it before too, you know what I mean?
It's really troubling. I mean, everything has been developed through a white lens, and it's really hard when white people are still predominantly in charge, which is, I see it in my district.
Right.
It's hard to when you try to bring a perspective from the lens of somebody who's black or brown, and that reluctance to listen is like the first obstacle. And then when they do listen, they pick and choose what they hear and how they hear it. And it's just this constant battle to like overcome like these little unnecessary obstacles of like, can you just please listen to what it's like to not be white?
Just listen. Yeah. And I got lucky. You know, I taught in a small charter school. And so I had a lot of autonomy in what was, you know, what I taught. Not necessarily the standards. Obviously, you have to teach the standards. Right. But as far as my approach and the curriculum, I was allowed to use. But I also advocated pretty hardcore for myself. And I think when you're in sometimes when you're in a bigger, like a district school, it's a little bit, because the ship is so big, it's a little bit harder to make those turns. You know what I mean? And so I actually created a ethnic studies class. I wrote an ethnic studies class and taught it to some high schoolers. And it was such a cool way to go about history, to look at the history of African Americans through the eyes of African Americans, like through primary sources. Yeah. Or even, you know, I had a predominantly Latino student base, like 60% at least. And so for them to hear about the Chicano movement and you know, Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez and all these people, that they kind of have like a vague idea who these people are, but not in a standard history book. These people are ignored. Exactly. At least it was when I was going through school. You know, I can remember being in high school and going through U.S. history and thinking like, where are the Mexicans? Like, where are the Mexicans? Where are the Mexicans? And I always just assumed like, oh, we just weren't there. But that's just not the case, you know? And so just to be able to do stuff like that and to see kids' eyes light up and see a person that looks like them in a history book is something that I never had. And to see their eyes light up is just like, my heart's getting warm thinking about it right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a cool thing.
I share that a lot with some of my fellow teachers and my administration, because the first time I got a real education about Mexican Americans, especially in the state of California, and the impact we had in the creation of this state and in this country, was when I took Mexican American studies classes at San Jose State as a college student. And I was like, I should not have had to wait that long. As a Californian who grew up in California, went to a predominantly Hispanic school, and the first time I learned about Mexican American history was when I chose to take a class as a college student in Mexican American history. And I learned about all of these different groups and people who lived throughout California when California was still Mexico, and all of this work that they did and the impact they had on a lot of the decisions that were made. That was the first time I learned about Mendez versus Westminster School District. Yeah, like I remember learning
Brown versus Board. Set the precedent for Brown versus Board.
And it was
in California. In California, we had no idea.
In California, we didn't know. We were the first to desegregate a school, and the governor at the time was the same Supreme Court judge who it's just like, he was our governor. He was a California governor, and like it was just like that just blew my mind. So I always remind my administrators, especially, I'm like, that's the first time I learned this. And we need to do something. And that's actually been, you're right about the districts. Like, our district's a small district as a whole, but our school, because we're the only high school, we're a big high school. And so our history teachers have been fighting to get ethnic studies incorporated, and we have not won that battle yet, but the fight is still on, because we know that just the anecdotal reasons, as people of color who've experienced it ourselves and who see it when we tell our students, like, hey, especially in Stockton has such a rich history with Mexican Americans, Chinese Americans, Filipino Americans,
Filipinos. Oh my God! Let me give a shout out to the Filipinos real quick, because just like you had that revelation. You had that revelation about California history. I got certain history through my family. Like, you can actually trace my family's lineage to this area since pre-United States. So like, since this area was Mexico, you can trace my family's lineage from California to South Texas to northern Mexico. Like, so to hear some of those things, and to hear, like, the urban legend in my family is that my great grandfather was killed by a band of Pancho Villa's men in northern Mexico, South Texas. Nice. I don't know how true it is, but I mean, I like to claim it. It's folklore. But there's so much we didn't learn in high school. And I was the same with you. I took a Chicano Latino Studies course at Fresno City College in my first year of college. And I was like, all of this, I was learning about like the farm workers movement, and, the UFW and Cesar Chavez. And it didn't know until college how impactful Filipinos were in the migrant working field. And my dad, my dad's parents were migrant workers. And strawberries mostly, and my dad, so that's, I'm not that far removed from that in my family,
right?
And to know that there is so much solidarity between two groups of people that share just a struggle, and it made me have a different appreciation for Filipinos. Not that I didn't have them before, but the more you see the struggles, you see the struggle as parallel. You know what I mean? It was Filipinos and Mexicans fighting for farm for farm workers' rights in the Central Valley, where we're living right now. And it's a shame that we, growing up in the Central Valley, don't know that rich history, and we had to go seek it out through higher education.
Especially in Stockton. I mean, Dolores Huerta is from Stockton.
Right. Yeah, she's dope, dude. I love her. I love her. She's just such a badass, and for her to be.
We got to see her. She came to the Hagen Museum, and we went to go see her, and I totally fangirled. And I asked her one question, and I was ready. I was like, I could die now, and it was just,
that's so funny.
But she's just so. And then
do you remember the question?
Yeah, I asked her.
This is important.
I asked her what her self-care was, because everybody was asking her. Everybody was asking her about, how were you able to do all this work, and questions that she's probably been asked a million times. And then I was like, what do you do to take care of yourself? Like, how is it? Because a week after this question, she got arrested.
That's great.
This was just a year ago. Like she just,
that's great.
And she said,
dope.
She got arrested.
Oh yeah, she got arrested. Yeah, she went back home because she lives down south, and she went to a protest.
Yeah, she was a protest,
and she wouldn't leave, and so they arrested her.
I love her.
Yeah,
I love her so much.
She's good trouble, baby.
Oh yeah, and so
good trouble, man. We lost some good ones this year.
Yes.
Man. Hey,
her response though.
Her response.
Oh yeah, her response.
I was gonna. Wait, what'd you say?
Her response was that she dances. That was her response.
Oh, for real? Yeah, for real? Did she say what kind of music, or she just said dances?
She likes jazz. And
good for her.
But she also likes to but I think she talked about dancing to like Mexican music, like cumbia and like but
shout out to Dolores if you're listening.
Yeah, I know. I wish. Oh my god.
Oh, that'd be great.
But she talks a lot about jazz music and dancing. So anyway, sorry, what were you gonna ask?
What's up?
It was just a stupid question actually. You guys live in Lathrop, right?
Yes.
So I thought you were in Stockton, but I was gonna ask you if you're gonna get lumpia in Stockton, where do you go?
Island Gourmet. Question. No, you get it somewhere else.
This is a trick question. The correct answer is your mama's house. All right.
Okay.
You got to go to mom's house, number one.
But his mom doesn't live here.
My mom don't live here, so but if I'm in Stockton, I'm a fan. Shout out to. I actually really like. It's called Manila Foods over there in Western Range. Holler at Western Range. Yeah, I really love them, but. Island Gourmet is definitely up there on the list, and I think followed by Best Lumpia.
Okay.
Best Lumpia's name is kind of I don't know if it's misleading, but I feel like Best Lumpia actually has the best pancit, probably. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's a pro tip. I'm actually gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, you gotta check it out.
The reason, so one of my boys brought just like a tray from Best Lumpia one time. It was just a tray of lumpia, and I got sick. I ate so much of it.
So in other words, you did it right.
So good.
Yeah.
What's that?
In other words, you did it right. You came correct.
Right. It was so good, man. It was so good. But that's what I was going to tell you. Is I've had a lot of Filipino students, and I really dug into this thread of Filipinos and Mexicans just because I told you, I feel like the struggle is so shared. And one of my students, she's just so cool. Her name was Rachel. She was really insightful. She was sitting there one day and she was like, some kids were talking about, they're like, yeah, Mexicans and Filipinos are basically like brothers. And then she was sitting there and she's like, no, that's not what it is. She's like, don't you understand? We're basically like bastard stepchildren. We have the same dad. Spain, who goes and basically rapes the native. And then and there's a group of people born out of it. And so she said, we're basically we're the sea Mexicans is what she started calling Filipinos. Mexicans. The island Mexicans are the sea Mexicans. And I was like, no, you're Filipinos, but it's good to see that connection.
Bastard children can still be brothers. So
yeah, exactly. So we went into this whole conversation, and she just had you could tell it was the first time she had ever thought about this connection before, and it was just a cool thing, and I had a great relationship with the kid.
Real question. Why am I not Hispanic? Answer me that. Riddle me that.
You?
One. Yeah.
Why aren't Filipinos Hispanic?
Why are we not Hispanic?
I don't know. Don't even get me started on labels.
Let me check that block then, dude. Give me the pass. I'll check the block.
I wanted this. This is a good.
Yeah, you can do it.
All right, thanks.
This actually brings up. So there's a book called The Latinos of Asia by Dr. Anthony Acampo, I think his name is. I read it, and he's a Filipino professor at UCLA. And he specifically focused on 2 neighborhoods in LA that are predominant, that have a large Filipino community. And he kind of talks about, Filipinos can very much be Hispanic. And he actually says the reason, so Filipinos actually almost were considered Hispanic because of the work they were doing with the Mexican farm workers. But they also did a lot of work with the Chinese Americans in their labor strikes, and that for some reason that one became more prominent. Like they became more prominently known for what they did with Chinese Americans in California. And so then when whatever bill they passed or whatever they decided on, they were like, this is going to apply to Asians. And because the Filipinos were fighting, they were like, well, I guess you're Asian too then. Like, in order for it to apply to Filipinos, like, you're going to
Okay,
be
so what would you say then, Tony? Do you say you're a Pacific Islander? Do you say Asian? Like, what do you say?
So I was blessed to have been born in Honolulu, Hawaii. So
Okay.
my parents are both born in the Philippines. So when people ask me where I come from, when I was growing up, I would say, oh, Philippines. And then they'd be like, oh, and they'd start speaking Tagalog or something. And I'd be like, oh, never mind. So then I started saying, then people were like, oh, where are you from? And I'm like, America. And then people were like, oh, you look like, well, but where are you really from? That was a question. But where are you really from? Like, what kind of Asian are you? So then I was like, oh, well, my parents are Filipino. Then later on, I discovered that when people asked, where are you from? And I answered, well, I was born in Hawaii. No questions were asked. And everyone just kind of accepted that. So from that point forward, I was like, I'm Hawaiian.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. I struggle with it too. Like just personally, I don't like Hispanic. I don't like Latino, even though I use Latino because I think just a broad term for the community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like an encapsulating thing. But just like the labels in general, I think are always been like a weird thing for me.
Yeah, me too.
I say Chicano personally.
Cool.
I used to say Mexican American. I now say Chicano just because I think that's more of a like a political thing for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
And just because I don't feel like I'm one or the other. I'm not Mexican enough for Mexicans, and then apparently I'm not. You know, when people have to ask me, but where are you from? Like they ask you, it makes me feel not American.
I just say I'm an underrepresented minority.
Yeah, I like that. So I press people on it actually, because I want them to feel uncomfortable about it.
Yeah.
So they'll ask me like, "What's your nationality?" I hate that. That's one of my pet peeves.
What's your nationality?
Yeah,
what's
they
your
don't know the
nationality?
difference.
And I'm like, I'm American.
Dude, I'm from
but
America.
Where are you from? From Northern California.
Yeah.
No, but where are you from? Like,
exactly. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you know. Well, okay. My ancestry. Well, check it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I just always thought that was interesting for these boxes that we're supposed to check. But
no
yes,
lie, dude. I lived in North Dakota.
You get to check Hispanic. All right.
Well, look. I lived in North Dakota for 4 years. Okay, my dad was stationed there, right? While I was there, literally the only Filipino or Asian kid, for that matter, on the block in my elementary school, right? So it was very common for kids to just say like, what tribe are you from? Because that was the only minority out there, was Native American Sioux tribe.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
So they're just like, what tribe are you from? Because they couldn't figure it out. And I would just be like, the Filipino tribe.
That's so funny. And they're probably like, oh, that's, yeah.
Okay, I think I heard of that before. Yeah. That's South Dakota, huh? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're like, yeah. All right, man. Whatever. Well, in Spanish, you usually say like chinito or chino.
Yeah.
And it's just Chinese, and that's usually like all Asians.
Yeah. It's
you know what I mean?
Encapsulating.
In Spanish, it's derogatory, I guess you would say.
Just inaccurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, way inaccurate. I know.
Yeah.
I agree with you, because when you were talking about, I've actually recently been telling people that I'm Chicana because of like the same reasons you said. Like I Mexican American is just a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
And then I'm also half white. My mom is white, and so then that's always been kind of weird too, because I'm definitely not Mexican enough for the Mexicans, but my eyes are brown enough that white people question me. So then my name is very Latin sounding. So it's just like, but I remember even seeing on social media, there was somebody I follow on Instagram. I don't remember his name, but he's Mexican, predominantly indigenous in ancestry, and he like refutes all titles that are European connected, like Hispanic, Latino, like anything, because he's like, I am indigenous, and like and so he kind of talks about how that's like a problem, you know, and I have indigenous blood because my grandmother is indigenous, but I don't even know what tribe she originates from. My grandparents don't talk about like our family line, and it's like kind of a weird thing that I don't know what their deal is. I've asked my dad. I was like, "Do you know anything?" He's like, "I don't know." And I thought he was lying. I was like, "Come on, you know something." And he's like, "I literally, your grandmother will tell me nothing." And I'm like, "Okay." But it's like it's always something that people have said it to me too. They're like, "Oh, your grandma's Indian looking." Like,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm
My
like,
grandfather, the same thing. My paternal, no, excuse me, my maternal great grandfather was full-blooded Yaqui native.
wow.
He wasn't Mexican; he was Yaqui.
Yeah.
And you look at pictures of him, and you're like, oh, dude,
Yeah.
I mean, they're black and white old pictures, but you're like, you're not Mexican, you're native.
Yeah.
And so that's why I always say, like, I have native, I have mixed blood, Mexican blood in me, and that's what a Mexican is. They're mestizo. That's what it started as, is like
Yeah.
that term Chicano was a derogatory term. Like if you trace the lineage back, the name Chicano, it used to mean, it was a derogatory term that basically meant like the bottom of, or the worst of, and it like the scraps almost.
Yeah.
And actually, I grew up in a Mexican restaurant, and my family owned and operated a Mexican restaurant growing up. And we used to have this dish, and it was called carne la chicana. It's like chicana beef.
Yeah.
And it was the scrap meat. It was like the shittiest meat, and you cut it up and put a bunch of spices in it, and you make a really good dish.
Yeah.
But it was called chicana. The more I've studied this, the more I realized, like, oh, that was not to equate it to the N word at all, because it doesn't carry the same weight, but it was a derogatory term that was taken out of the Chicano movement and used as an empowering thing to say, like, I am a mix. I live in two worlds, basically, and I'm taking this word as an empowerment to kind of label my movement of what I'm fighting for.
And you know what? And that really connects too, because my dad growing up used to always tell me, like, don't let people call you Chicana or Chicano. Like, we don't call ourselves that. But my dad couldn't explain it, because I remember I'd say, why? And he's like, well, it means that you're like a whitewashed Mexican. That's what he used to say. And I was like, okay, I guess. But there's like a bunch of other words that also mean whitewashed Mexicans. So I'm not like, I'm like, I don't know what you're, but I think, like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that's probably the sense that he was like, there's just this general, like, whatever. And then also too, we know in the Mexican.
Where does the term cholo come from?
I don't know.
Because before when Pachuco was the original one.
Oh yeah,
they used to call them Pachucos, and then it turned to Cholo like in the 60s and 70s. And
we got a research topic.
They were like,
yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one to look up.
I feel like I did look it up, because I wrote a paper on Pachucos for that Mexican American history class that I took. Yeah, I was talking like the LA riots and everything. I wrote this whole. I was writing. I remember the paper focused on how like Pachucos, with the way they dressed, and like it was there was a very empowering movement, this and but then it was white society flipped it as like gangsters or whatever. And I remember writing, it was kind of like a little like study on how like being a Pachuco, being a Cholo, like that, it was something that was to be proud of, and it was like a way to like regain your power back, and how white society tried to flip it and like, well, you're a gangster, and like, and that the impact that it had on the community. But so I feel like if I go back and find that paper, it was like over 10 years ago now, like I might have found out where the word Cholo came from, but I don't remember.
My family had the same, very similar sentiments. We weren't allowed, we couldn't say Chicano, it was Mexican.
Yeah.
You're not Chicano, you're Mexican, or you're Mexican American. And they knew that term was derogatory. And that's part of the reason why I do use it. Because I feel like there's some like identity things that my family wasn't necessarily allowed to embrace, that me being an educated person now, an educated person of color, and knowing more about our history that my parents didn't necessarily have the opportunity to study. I feel like it's important to bring those things to family,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things, like growing up, we were encouraged not to speak Spanish in public. I grew up in like a predominantly white area just outside of Stockton in Calaveras County. And we were one of like very few Mexican families there, and just assimilating, and it's not that I'm people always ask like, what generation are you? Are you like first generation, second generation? And I always just say like, I'm generation zero. Like my family's been here since borders were moved, and then borders moved, and now we're American all of a sudden. And so I don't necessarily like identify with that, like what level of generation you are. But still, my grandparents, my parents speak Spanish, my grandparents speak Spanish, and they would speak Spanish in the house, and even we would a little bit, but in public, it was not. It was you want to assimilate. You know what I mean? We don't want people to know that we're different. We already have the big Mexican food restaurant in town to tip us off enough. We don't need to, go speaking Spanish in public now.
That's like my parents too were very reluctant to speak Tagalog around the kids. I mean, I felt like they spoke it around us, but they weren't engaging with us directly in Tagalog. They were very consciously trying to make sure that I got this English accent because it's fancy. Right. So,
do you speak Tagalog at all?
No, I don't.
Yeah,
I actually speak more Spanish than Tagalog.
I love it. See, you can check that box now.
Check that box, right?
Check that box. Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you this real quick because so I've been working for veterans. I'm a veteran advocate, veteran representative for the past couple of years, and we have to fill out a lot of federal and state paperwork. And the boxes that are on there, it goes, are you Hispanic or non-Hispanic? And then it says, and then what is your race? White, black, Native, Asian, or Pacific Islander, right? And it's so funny because I'll go Hispanic, non-Hispanic. They'll be like Hispanic, and then I'll say okay, and then race, and then they're like Hispanic, and I'm like, you actually have the options are white, black, Asian, Native, and they're like, oh, Native. Most of the people that I've interviewed will say Native, but there are also those who will say I am Hispanic and I am white.
Yeah.
Is that something? Well, I guess like what does that come from? I'm kind of curious.
So think about this. If you think about this, Spaniards, Chicano blood or Mexican blood is half Spaniard.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's an indigenous. The mestizos are born out of the bastard children of the natives and the Spaniards.
Right.
So Spaniards are European.
Yeah.
Spaniards aren't necessarily Latinos even. And so think about like what Great Britain was in terms of colonization to the United States. Spain was as colonizers to Latin America.
But what makes someone qualify as Latino then?
That's a good question. Like for me personally, when I check those boxes, I hate them. But ethnicity, I do Hispanic or Chicano if it allows. And when it comes to race, it'll say white, black, Asian, or other. I always click other if I don't have an option for native.
The other,
because personally, I think if you can dissect it any way you want. Like Mexicans technically are half European. I don't think that makes me white. And so I refuse to click that box. Not that there's anything wrong with it. If you're white, click that box. But personally, that's not how I identify. So, even in our older generations, like my grandfather's generation, I can remember my great uncle telling us that we were white, or telling us that Mexicans were white because we were half Spanish. And I just that never stuck with me. It was always like, it just never stuck with me that like Mexicans were white, but I understand the why people try to classify it like that, but I'm not.
Well, I was wondering if you had actually experienced something like that, and that was the response I was curious about. So yeah, like when you look into the Mendez v. Westminster case or versus Westminster case that we were talking about earlier with integration, like one of the things that was the foundation of that argument for allowing the integration to occur was that these Mexicans in these particular districts were being assimilated, or the argument was that the goal was for assimilation, and therefore they were no longer as Mexican as before and were becoming more white.
Right.
So it's really interesting that, I mean, in the language they used back then, I wondered how that carried on to today, because I think that's a little more rare in a modern sort of interpretation of what a Hispanic person is. Is that true? You feel like you see that trend or no?
I think it depends with I think as far as people trying to classify Mexicans. I think that's actually more of a standard. It's more of a standard, like your race is white, even though your ethnicity might be Hispanic.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
I know that my generation and our age of people, and maybe like Gen X and beyond, basically, people that are Chicano will not be that will not be a thing.
Right.
When one of us, when a Gen X or a millennial, I'm a millennial technically, like when one of our people of that generation is in charge of the census, all that stuff's going to change.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm convinced of it.
I think so too.
I'm convinced of that. That's antiquated stuff anyways. So
it's super antiquated. And I think like I have seen like people talk about too, because like Mexicans, all the different Latino groups have such a mix of skin color and hair color and eye color, because we do have people who identify as Afro-Latino, and then you do have Latinos that are white, blonde, blue-eyed, and and everything in between. And so like just the whole like race we know is a social construct, and the whole thing is really, because I had this conversation with my students actually this year. I do this multicultural me assignment with them, and one of the things I make sure to do, you reminded me earlier, is I tell them the difference between a nationality, a race, and an ethnicity. And like we talk about, like race really is just based on how you look. Like it's really like this very feeble label that like and then it was interesting because one student, I have one student who's very ahead of the game, and he was like, because we were talking, he said, well, what about Asians? Well, because Indians are considered Asian, but they don't necessarily look like East Asians. And I go, and South Asians don't look like East Asian. Right. I was like, my husband's Filipino, he's Asian, but he doesn't look like a Korean. No. But and it's like, and I go, that's why generally race is under scrutiny right now as a thing, because it changes, and like it changes based on whatever the dominant group decides, which right now and has been for a while is white people. Like and we actually were just talking about this recently because of another discussion I have going on outside of the podcast, but it was where the book White Fragility talks about how Italians were able to assimilate. Like initially they were mistreated and discriminated against when they were immigrating into the United States. But then over time, it was decided, you're European, you look white, you're white. And now they're considered white. And they don't live under the same kind of discrimination they once lived under, nor do they get discriminated against the way black people do, or people with more melanin in them. And basically the decision has been how much melanin is in your skin is going to determine what your race is.
And I agree with you. And that's such a hard conversation to have, because we just have these constructs in our head. We're born with them. Yeah. Like we're gonna try to put you into these boxes as soon as you're born. And if you don't educate yourself, or at least put yourself in a position to be able to even be asked these questions and respond to these questions, then you're never gonna think about it.
Right.
Well, it's like the human mind is just so powerful, and at the same time it's so weak. Because we have these abilities to develop these really complex constructs and concepts, but then when it comes to making an analysis of something, like for the purpose of like just a quick assessment, it jumps to these types of classifications, and it's kind of it's just the way we are able to survive on a day-to-day basis. Like, okay, that's good, that's bad, that's hot, that's cold. These very broad strokes are used, and it's not effective when you need to do like actual work and think. But in terms of like just surviving, it's very effective. So we're at constant odds with our own minds when we have to do this kind of stuff. But I think it's just so funny because
and I think we're tribal.
Yeah, exactly. We have it in our
humans are naturally tribal.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, it's in our nature for sure.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned Italians. I've had this conversation with my tias before, and my mom's sister, and she said, when in her day and age, she was born in like the early late 50s. She said in her day, Italians were really discriminated against, and they weren't considered white, because I said something about how Italians are white, and she said, in my day, Italians weren't white, and I told her, I said, but they assimilated within a generation or two pretty quickly.
Right.
You know what I mean? A couple generations. And then I also had this conversation about how when you come from overseas and you're European, or you can at least like appear to be white, pass for being white, you can blend in pretty quickly. It's when your country is on the other side of a border that is just, a couple of miles away, that it's in your face a lot, and you can't necessarily escape it as well as somebody who could be white passing or blending in as much. So it's more in your face. It's a little bit harder to separate yourself from that, I think, than it is for people who are overseas. But then again, you get people who are Asian who can't escape that. You get people who are from Africa who can't escape that. I really do think, being able to be passing as white has a lot to do with it.
What's really interesting too about this? Okay, so I just looked this up real quick, but did you know that the oldest university in Asia is actually in the Philippines, and it is a Catholic university?
I did not know that. That doesn't surprise me.
Founded in 1611, University of Santo Tomas.
Wow.
And this is so, to me, like the perfect example of like what a Filipino is. It's just like, what the hell? I don't understand. Like, because you look at a Filipino and you're like, maybe they speak Tagalog, maybe they have a British accent. Maybe, like, I have no idea.
Why is their last name Flores?
Yeah.
What's going on? For real, it's like Flores, Santos, and there's like one other one that I'm just like, every
Gomez.
Filipino has it. Yeah. Oh, there's some Gonzaleses too. There's some Gonzales Filipinos. And I'm just like, come on, man, you can't be a Gonzales. Like, that's too Mexican,
But I think that kind of goes back to, though, like, something else that especially Mexicans share with Filipinos is we don't know what the heck our label is. Like, we're like, what are we? I don't know. Like, we should just like go under the same label. Like, let's just make one up for ourselves.
I love it. I love how most of this conversation has been about Mexican and Filipinos. Honestly, I never thought I would have talk this much about it, and I love it. I think it's great.
Dude, I definitely didn't see this going in this direction. But it happens to be one of my favorite topics because my children are literally Mexican Filipinos.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time.
Like, no lie, for dinner, I brought home
today.
I brought home pancit, and then I cooked enchiladas.
And then
my son made a pancit beef taco.
Yeah, he didn't want the enchilada. But he wanted pancit and he wanted a tortilla. So we gave him some, and then there was leftover meat and beans, and he goes, "Oh, I want that too." So his little tortilla had half the meat and beans from the enchiladas, and then the other half had pancit, and he closed it and he ate it. And we're like,
"Hey, that's brilliant, dude. He might be onto something."
No, it was not appetizing. It did not look appetizing.
I mean, he ate it.
Before I forget, there's this place they have one in Tracy, but there's also one in downtown Stockton.
Papa Herbs.
Exactly. That's
Shout
what
out
I'm about
Papa
to say.
Herbs,
Papa
dude.
So he went to school with my dad. Herb went to school with my dad at Franklin.
Wait, you know Papa Herb, like the real Papa Herb?
Yeah, man. It was funny because a few years ago we were standing in line in Tracy. We were on our way to the Bay to a Giants game, and we were standing in line at their place that's right there in Tracy by In-N-Out.
Yeah.
And
I've been there.
This guy comes out and he talks to my dad and he was like, "Hey, did you go to Franklin?" And my dad was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they gave each other a hug. And it was his spot. It's Papa Herb.
Oh my God!
So my dad went to school with the dude.
There's definitely name dropping you.
Man, their steak fries. Oh, they're so good.
Yeah,
yes.
Their food is
like their
good.
version of the asada fries. They're so good.
So good. Shout out Papa
Herb.
Herb.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah,
if you haven't been there yet and you live in Stockton or Tracy,
downtown Stockton, it's just a walk around the block.
Yeah.
Little Manila used to be close by there too. Little Manila Society. Shout out Dylan Delvo, holding it down over there. They're now in South Stockton.
Oh yeah, they moved to South Stockton. So actually, I'm friends with the director of education at the San Joaquin Historical Society, and they were fighting to try to save one of the buildings because they have the buildings. They try to maintain the 3 buildings that are left as historic landmarks. And I guess the Historical Society, along with the Little Manila Rising, they were trying to save a building that was going to get sold, and they didn't save it. And the city's going to sell it. So it's like, I just hate I hate how Little Manila in Stockton is not recognized. And I've always argued this for years. Stockton is trying real hard to bring in more businesses and boost the economy. And there's this prime tourism opportunity with things like Little Manila and the Lock Chinatown area that's just down the street. And like all these places, there's tourism opportunity there. Like it's just but it has to be the community that it belongs to should be the ones who identify, because very quick that could very easily turn into a gentrification issue. But man, like there could be some really great.
I thought about that. That would be really cool. Yeah. My wife's from that area. She grew up in South Stockton. She went to Edison.
Shout out Edison.
Yeah, shout out
Little Manila.
Basically, yeah. So she goes in. We were just talking about. Actually, when we were making dinner earlier, we were listening to one of your guys' shows. We were talking about ethnic studies, and how two of the people that she actually went to school with at Edison are back there, and they're teaching ethnic studies courses, and they've been like champions for ethnic studies courses. Yeah. And I'm not sure what the guys' names are. I know we probably run in the same circles, but they seem like pretty cool dudes that are doing some cool stuff.
Tell her to pass the word and get us a recommendation so we can interview them.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I know I taught with somebody who is from there and did some work with, what is it? Is it Manila Rising?
Yeah,
Manila Rising, you're right.
Yeah.
I think she did some work with them, if I'm not mistaken. Also, do you know who Lang is? Do you know Lang Lungtao?
Yes, we emailed him, Lang. You need to email me back. I know, Lang, email me back. I emailed it. We connected on Twitter, and then we took it to email, and he's supposed to respond. And we want him on the show.
He's a cool dude. I know he's worked in Little Manila with the organizations before and stuff too. So.
Yeah, we are fans of Lang. We've actually both met him in separate occasions, and he doesn't remember us. But he's also a super busy dude, so we don't blame that on you, Lang.
He's met millions of people.
He's got his hands full with with the Stockton City Council or the Stockton School Board and all that
stuff. The school board.
Stockton Scholars.
And I think he still teaches too, right? Is he still teaching?
I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Well, either way, he's a really busy guy, but we're trying to get him on the show too. Yeah.
Cool.
Dude, we just went on a roller coaster
90-minute roller coaster.
Yeah, 90 minutes. That was really cool. Hopefully we got to talk about everything you guys wanted to talk about. This is a great conversation though.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I am grateful and I'm proud to have had this conversation.
And if people didn't catch, Daniel is a teacher. He's a history teacher. He's just not in the classroom right now.
Yeah. I guess we just jumped into it. I didn't even talk about that. But yeah, I'm a credentialed history teacher. I taught for almost a decade. Taking a break for a little while. And
he's now socially challenged on Spotify. Holler at him.
Yeah.
Socially challenged. We got a little Facebook thing going on, Twitter, all that kind of stuff, and you can find it on Spotify. So
he's a beautiful human being.
If we can,
thanks, brother. I appreciate that.
Do you have like any social media for your podcast or a website or anything right now, or just?
Yeah, we're just running some stuff on Facebook and Twitter. It's just called Socially Challenged.
Okay.
So... and on Twitter, it's Socially Challenged Pod. And that's it. We're on Spotify, or we're trying to get all the stuff worked around to, have it operating smooth like you guys have on all platforms. And, we're just trying to do something, and, we're not trying to make it the next big media company or anything. We just want to have a conversation and, get some people to listen. So give it a listen.
We'll link some of your those socials on our website too, so people can.
Oh yeah, I'll send you all that info. I'll text it to you.
I think it's a brilliant idea. I think it's one of the most important messages we have right now. We need unity, and I really appreciate and respect what you're doing out there.
For sure. Thanks, man. Thanks. I'd love to have you guys maybe even drop in on an episode and we can do a segment together or something.
Hey,
cool.
I love it. All right, we're done.
Thank you so much for listening to Educators Not Robots. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you like our podcast, please subscribe on whatever platform you access your podcasts on, and leave us a review. Whenever we get reviews, it helps boost visibility for our podcast, and so we can draw in more listeners. Thanks again for your support, and we hope that you listen again soon.